Hello and welcome to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Miles. Today I'd like to talk about the 4 essentials for expertise. What makes an expert? And I was wondering this because I saw a video on YouTube that I thought was so fascinating, and I really was reflecting on how it applies to expertise in botanical medicine. If you want to see the original video, it is Veritasium on YouTube, and it's called What Makes an Expert. Apparently, the 10,000 hour rule is not enough. This video concluded, after looking through extensive research, that there were 4 aspects that were required to make a true expert, rather than somebody who has just put in time in a given field. Now, a true expert has this kind of skill that just seems uncanny to other people. And it's because they're able to chunk information in a way that is meaningful and accurate. And that allows them to take mental shortcuts that give them seemingly superhuman abilities. Now, it's not truly superhuman. They've just gone about understanding it at a deep level and at a very nuanced level. So I started to reflect on the following with regard to the practice of medicine. Now, the 4 are: number 1, repeated attempts; number 2, a stable or valid environment; number 3, timely feedback; and number 4 is deliberate practice, failure, pain, and discomfort. So looking at number 1, repeated attempts. This seems easy enough. Education and experience are important. However, the quality of this experience differentiates experts from people who simply put the time in. With the right kind of repeated exposure, you can begin to see meaningful patterns and chunk information into groups, which make it easier to navigate. Expert chess players can glance at a board and later replicate every piece in it. Expert martial artists can see a fight happen in a flurry of hits and describe each one from the perspective of both opponents. They can give you a play-by-play of who hooked, who slipped, where they stepped, how they stepped. It's very easy for them to take in the information from both opponents at the same time. When repeated attempts are placed within the context of all 4 factors, the ability to predict and provide prognosis becomes increasingly accurate. It's the ability to anticipate and predict future events which makes expertise so valuable. If you've never seen an event before, then even an educated guess is not likely to be useful. In fact, out of the thousands of predictions political pundits who are thought to be experts, out of all of these predictions they make on current events, they turn out to be accurate less than random guesses based on a coin toss. Despite reading history and majoring in political science, their guess is often as good as yours. They have a lot of history to point to. Unfortunately, the current events they're experiencing, they haven't experienced in the past. And it's in a non-stable environment. And that brings us to number 2, this stable environment. To get better, you can't see people with random diseases. If everybody you see has a different disease that you've never seen before and it all looks brand new, there's just not going to be any ability for meaningful pattern recognition, and the experience won't grow. The more variety you have to treat, the less skilled you will become at any one. It takes an arduous 10-year path to become an expert if you have these 4 conditions right. But if you're seeing everything different constantly, it spreads this thin. It doesn't give you a laser focus. It creates too broad of a focus to the point where meaningful patterns cannot be developed. Now, perhaps at the point of 200 years, you could become an expert in a very broad sense. But if you don't want to wait that long, it makes more sense to kind of pick a specialization. Most of our early experience comes from student clinics and internships. student clinics are a double-edged sword because the people who are there often aren't that serious about their health, or they're coming in because they want attention or massage. They're not really the compliant patients that you get when people are very serious about their health. As a result, they don't tend to get better. That's why you often see the same patients coming to student clinics for 10 or 20 years. So in this case, there are repeated attempts, but the environment is not stable, either through low compliance or through seeing very random disease types without any sort of stable conditions. This is obviously very chaotic, and the more chaotic it is, the less likely you are to see somebody through the duration of their entire treatment cycle, and that makes it very difficult to develop the experience necessary to make a meaningful prognosis. Which leads us into number 3, timely feedback. You need to know whether you're winning or losing, and why. I shadowed many doctors in China during my first visit, but we saw so many teachers that I never got to see the same patients repeatedly. I had no idea whether their prescriptions were effective or not. While I got tremendous exposure, the quality of it was insufficient to provide me with any background for expertise. It was only after staying in China for years that I could see the long-term effects on patients. The most valuable lessons I had were seeing doctors make mistakes and how they corrected these mistakes. Which leads us to number 4, deliberate discomfort. This last area is a balancing act. On one hand, if you aren't failing, you aren't growing. On the other, if you're failing too much, you will get demoralized and lose confidence and rapport with your patients. Based on research on the dopamine system, it's a good idea to do the same thing the majority of the time so that you're in the habit of winning, but keep a handful of cases that are really difficult to keep you interested in growing. In my experience, if you aim for stability and attempt to treat the same kinds of cases in order to make your repeated attempts develop in a stable environment, Murphy's Law kicks in. There will be those who will throw you off anyway, and you'll find that they're unexpectedly fascinating. Someone may come in with chronic fatigue and mention at the last second as they walk out, this might have something to do with my bone cancer or HIV. And you think, what the fuck? Why didn't you mention this before? But it's these aspects of human error that create this chaos that gives you the mental stimulation and the risk of failure. Because without taking those risks, you're not in a space to grow. So you want a high success rate, but you also want to be taking risks so that you can grow. And these seem to be contrary to one another. They seem to counter each other. But actually, if you use them properly, like an 80-20, you can use them in a way that's complementary, that really engages your dopamine system while also maintaining a high clinical success rate. Constantly taking new challenges takes you out of the stable environment, and it makes it impossible to see enough of the same thing to begin chunking information. Still, it's those challenging cases that keep you up at night and bring your thoughts to the patient's treatment strategy at all hours of the day. And that's what drives you to dive deeper into the books, to seek out mentorship with experts in the field required to help this patient. Xunzi, a Chinese philosopher, said that a nation is best run when government officials are bored. This is kind of the Peter principle. If they're elevated too quickly, they get promoted to a place of incompetence. Eventually, the entire government will be operating at 20% capacity instead of 90 or 100. We need to grow and take on new challenges, but remember to balance this with sticking to what you're already competent in. so that you can refine your craft and develop true expertise at a much deeper level. 10,000 hours will pass regardless of what you do. Whether you take the hard road or the easy road largely determines whether you develop the kind of superhuman expertise or simply solidify mediocrity. It's a sobering thought, and it also means that there's a shortcut to expertise. Consider designing your life and your clinical practice with these 4 factors in mind so that you can become a category expert in a shorter period of time. Now, while there are no true shortcuts, there is such a thing as focusing your attention. And if there's a shortcut, it's not being distracted. When we look at this list honestly, we have to come to terms that we won't be experts in every area of specialization. We will truly need to trust and depend upon our colleagues to do their best on this journey along with us. The more they flourish, the more we can all flourish as a profession. So please share this podcast with a colleague and ask each other how you can support each other on the road to increasing your expertise in your chosen field. For me, it's dampness. Is that everything in Chinese medicine? No. But it's where I focus. It's where my best work has been. It's where I find challenge. And it's where, on occasion, I can be helpful to colleagues as well to help remove some of the diagnostic noise that dampness and phlegm bring. Am I an expert? I don't think so. But step by step, I'm on the way. Thank you for listening to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Miles.